Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is March 31st, 2024, Easter Sunday. And to celebrate this time of rebirth in nature, I've got a little tiny commentary about this very famous book, La Divina Commedia by Dante Alighieri, the national poet of Italy. My wife Marilyn and I are reading this book to each other. We've just finished reading the Decameron, which will be the subject of another commentary later on. But I want to say a little bit about the Divine Comedy. This is, you might say, the national poem of Italy. All Italians historically have read this book. The famous Primo Levi, a writer from Turin, was in a concentration camp in World War II, and he kept himself morally alive by reciting bits of the Divine Comedy to another friend of his who also knew it by heart. This is the translation by the American poet John Ciardi. That's the one that we are using. And let me just tell you a few things about this book. First of all, it is the first of many, many books in the Western tradition which involves the self, the person looking at himself or herself, a bit like Hamlet, for example. Dante did this for the first time, and the book is truly extraordinary. I'm only going to talk about Canto 1, which is famous all on its own. The Divine Comedy has three parts: Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise. The last part of the Divine Comedy is absolutely stunning. It's absolutely amazing, full of light and poetry. The Inferno, which is the first part, is a portrait of hell. Dante was an extraordinary man. He was a man of Florence. He was born in 1265. That's a very long time ago. He was exiled in about 1302, and that exile was a very bitter experience for him. The Divine Comedy is in these three parts, and the opening is hell itself. Well, what is hell in this book? It is, in fact, a terrible anguish of the soul. The book begins with the narrator poet falling into the most terrible depression, a dark wood of the soul. And Dante was prone to this kind of extreme feeling. And the Inferno is famous for its portrayal of alienation, of loss, of terrible loss of hope. The banner of hell at the beginning of this book is, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." So the first third of the Divine Comedy is about humankind losing its way in the most terrible and violent sins. It's appropriate for this Easter because the women and children of Gaza are suffering from terrible evil of the sort that Dante wrote about. You might call their situation Dantean. The beginning of the poem in Italian is very famous. Nel mezzo del cammin de nostra vita mi ritrovai per un selva oscura che la diritta via era smarrita. This is what John Ciardi, the American translator, does with that, and I'm just going to read it to you from Canto 1. And this is maybe the very most famous opening in the Western tradition of a poem. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. That's what the opening canto of the Divine Comedy is about. Finding yourself in a very, very dark wood. Dante's lucky, though, because in the poem, it's a visionary poem. It's kind of like science fiction. He meets Virgil. Now, Virgil's not allowed to go to heaven, but Virgil will be his guide, and Virgil will lead him through the terrible pathways of hell, because Dante has to go there in order to go upwards to purgatory and then eventually to paradise. About midway in the journey, Virgil has to stop because he cannot go to these higher reaches. He wasn't a Christian. He was born before the Christian period. And then Beatrice, the love of Dante's life, will take over and guide the poet upwards to really a vision of God. This is what I am reading with my wife this Easter. So it's a great deal of pleasure, actually. And it takes us back to the medieval period, to 700 years ago, because Dante set this poem. The opening of the poem is on the day before Good Friday, 1300. And that's the opening of the poem in that dark wood from which eventually Dante emerges.